Hello and welcome to the Everyday Adventure podcast. My name is Nicki Bass and I will be bringing you thoughts and ideas and hopefully some inspiration on how to build more adventure into your everyday life.
So today it is an absolute privilege to be speaking to Danusia Malina Derben, who is an entrepreneur, a C-suite expert and a mother of 10. She's also founder of School for Mothers and the host of the School for Mothers and School for Fathers podcasts. She is also an author and has just published her book, Noise, a Manifesto Modernising Motherhood, and which aims to radically overhaul how we think about modern motherhood. And given that so many of the conversations I have with women and with men around this podcast are about how to reconnect or retain our adventurous self, that bit of ourselves that is sort of thinking about what we want to do, where we want to go, how we grow, I really wanted to speak to Danusia about her book, about her philosophy, and just sort of think about how we can retain that sense of ourselves when there are so many other needs and demands on our time. So, Danusia, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, hi, Nicki. It's lovely to be here. And what a lovely introduction. Wow. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Like I said, it's a real pleasure. I guess where I would like to start is thinking about, I know that noise is part of your wider philosophy surrounding sort of motherhood and working mothers and how we retain that sort of sense of ourselves. But I just wondered what inspired you to write the book. Was it a single moment where you thought, actually, this really needs to be written, or is it a sort of accumulation of I guess, years of experience and thoughts in this area?
I was frequently asked to write a book on, I guess, the more kind of nuts and bolts of juggling career and kids, because as you said, I've got a lot of kids, I've got 10. So, and I have, quite a big career, and I'm in corporates a great deal as a consultant and lead a big company. So I guess I had a lot of approaches for that. And I mean, what I mean by that is, in discussions with publishers and, we were talking deals, etc. And so I got a bit, I think it wasn't a one moment that led to noise. It was a gradual evolution of going from this nuts and bolts book that was really interesting. It could have been, except that the writer, as in me, wasn't interested in it. So the problem was that I was kind of, yes, I could write that. And yes, I have an awful lot of experience in juggling, but it just didn't land in my heart. Like, yeah, I can't wait to sit and do that. I've written other books and I was an academic, so publishing was very much part of my life. So I know you have to be really, really invested in something to see it through. And I wasn't at that point. So what happened was I went on holiday. I drove the kids in a 27-year-old, what I call a jalopy. So our old car. And I drove her from Brighton all the way to the Outer Hebrides full of kids. And we were going to an island that is actually an island off the never eat shredded wheat. Yes, that's it, the West Coast. And it's actually Vanessa Branson's, so Richard's sister. And it's a complete little island. It has a few little houses on it. It's called Eileen Shona, and it's stunning. It has, definitely has the tale that J.M. Barrie, who wrote Peter Pan, actually conceived of Peter Pan on this island. So it is Neverland. I went there, and I was at the time thinking about this book and this book deal that I had on my hands, and it's totally quiet, no internet, no cars, nothing, just myself and lots of kids, very swallows and Amazons. It was just ourselves and walking and foraging and crabbing and thinking, no TV, nothing. The seed of the idea for noise was born there. And fast forward a couple of years and it was lockdown. And I'd still been writing and still been gestating quite what I would do with this. And then the noise of lockdown went. The noise just stopped. there was nothing. And there was this period in lockdown 1 here in the UK where all we could hear was this clarity. I live in the country, so that's the reason that there was this sparkling clarity. There was no road, no road noise, no cyclists, in fact, for quite a few days. And it was this miraculous, if not weird and scary period where the noise stopped. It really happened. I just went, and that is it. I had been just stating the idea that there is this cacophony of noise that mothers and fathers, but particularly in this first book, I have another book coming out in November on fatherhood. So, but the first one, there's this incredible orchestra around the noise of what mothers are meant to be, how we're meant to show up, the actions we take, the kind of people we can be, the vigilance that is kind of, the monitoring on us. Pretty well as soon as we become pregnant or are telling people that we're going to become a mother, hoping to become a mother, then people have opinions, and that becomes the noise. And I frame it and I call it a mother stopper culture. And so I see it as all of this medley of noise kind of pressing in, and just, it can be low, it doesn't have to be loud, it can be constant, it can be occasional, but we all know it. We have all of these opinions, not just from outside, but also from within. So it was, for me, when we talk about, was it a particular moment, it was actually the most incredible adventure that led to this. And my kids love talking about our time on Eileen Shoner. We were there for 2 weeks. I mean, it was, it is a spectacular place, absolutely beautiful.
Gosh, I think there's two things. One, that just sounds absolutely magical. I think in terms of an adventure with your children, there's a whole nother podcast in there about, but what children actually need and what we actually need in terms of holidays and space and yeah, that space to think. I'm really fascinated how your book, and obviously, I know you've obviously thought very carefully around the title, but that actually it was born out of this place of real stillness, of quiet, of actually having that space and time to just think and reflect and notice the difference, I suppose.
Exactly.
And like you said, that we are constantly bombarded with needs, demands and noise and sounds and, all that narrative. My next is sort of two questions in one, really. It's, given that, what do you think is the biggest challenge in terms of what modern mothers face in terms of trying to manage that noise? And I guess also your thoughts around actually what's worked particularly well for you in carving that space out in order to sort of be able to sit still and for that creativity to come as well.
I'll answer the second one first. I'm often on stages talking about working trends, trends for working women, not only mothers, because clearly not all women are mothers, and organizations, leadership, all those kinds of things. And often asked, so what's the formula? Come on, how do you have so many children, be perky? And what they mean is not crawling into the room in a nightdress, and actually be very self-determined and appear to have your own self still. For some years, I felt quite uncomfortable about those questions, not because I don't have advice. I do have advice, but my advice may really not be applicable to somebody else. And I'm very anti the kind of, oh, you take these 6 steps and you'll have the life I have, because after all, I'm white, educated, of a certain social location, let's just say, and therefore how can anybody else kind of transfer what I have onto their life? It's actually quite weird. So I felt quite uncomfortable when I was faced with these questions. And once I cottoned on, once I joined the dots in my head about noise, I realized why. Actually, what I needed to be telling everybody, instead of like, well, if you get up at 5 or you do this, you get your clothes out the night before, or all these kind of minutiae tactics that are important, but actually they're really only papering over the cracks, because not everyone can get up early and take some time to themselves. Not everyone can get into nature and enjoy that. That's very specific. But actually what we can do is recognize the noise. When I realized that that's actually how I have remained being a very self-determined, what I mean is, self-actualizing, somebody with my own sense of self, with my own Danusia identity, rather than Danusia as mummy and only a mummy until they leave, then actually I would have understood it a bit better if I'd cottoned on, but I hadn't. So how I've done it is actually to pick apart these central pieces of motherhood and not necessarily take what I've heard as gospel. And so my answer is the same for the challenge and how I've done it, which is, I love the word bombarded that you use, Nicki. We're bombarded with all these opinions and beliefs and assumptions about what happens when we become a mother. And what's happened is that we've taken them as read. We've just simply taken them as read. There are books and books and books and books that take these things as if they are a given. If we talk about guilt, for instance, if you read about motherhood, you'll read about guilt. It's as if once you become a mother, you have to become guilty. You just then assume that it will become part of your experience. And when we're told something like that, then when we don't find it, then we're going to look for it. So I in my research, I've been told so many times by women, mothers, I feel quite guilty, Danusia, that I actually aren't guilty. I'm like, okay. It's because they're guilty that they don't feel the usual experience, because they've heard it's the typical experience. So for me, the reason I had to do this, and I mean by this, capture it for a book, was because once I realized, that's how you've actually managed to stay being you, stay being an adventurer. I mean, it's absolutely crazy to, by the way, drive in a really old car all the way up to the Outer Hebrides onto a fabulous island. It's crazy and magical. How do we retain that spirit? Well, we don't take what we're told as a given. And so I haven't taken these things as a given, and I've taken bits that suit me and bits that don't. I've said, okay, well, how important is it that I adhere to that? I've interrogated it. Yeah. So the biggest challenge, I think, for women wanting to have children, or mothers, or those who do, is this kind of agreement of playing along with, that's how it has to be. Because the spirit of adventure doesn't do that. The spirit of adventure doesn't say, I can't do that with my children. It says, #watch me. I will get on a plane with a backpack and a couple of kids. I will go to an island, and I will island hop in Greece. Or if that's not your bag, I will get myself a camper van, and I will, go around the UK. That's perhaps not adventure to listeners, but for many people, that spirit, if you're kind of complicit with the status quo, it could be in opposition to the adventurous spirit. And so that's what links with my book, because I have unpacked the kind of these central pillars of motherhood and questioned, is that so? And I've interspersed it with my memoir so that you can see how I've played that out in my own life. So it's not a telling book. In fact, that's the one thing it's not. It does not tell women how to live. I really can't stand that, because I don't know how you need to live. We've got enough of that.
And I think that is such a good point as well, because I think, going back to that point about being bombarded, I think there is also this idea somewhere that the perfect mother or the perfect parent exists, that there is something that we're all striving towards. Yeah. And that somehow if we just do this one thing or deny ourselves this other thing, that we will get closer to that mythical person out there. And I think that's where so much of that guilt comes from, is this sort of sense that we're somehow getting it wrong, rather than sort of seeing that as an inherent part in a way of parenthood that's we haven't got manuals for any of our children. They're all different. And yeah, that getting it wrong is part of that package. But like you said, that guilt becomes so intrinsically linked to the experience, but seeing it as evidence in a way that we shouldn't be doing something. I wanted to pick up on your point about that sort of spirit of adventure as well, because I think, you absolutely touch on a point that I make really often about how adventure in the end is about a mindset. And by the way, I do think like going round an old car around the UK is a major adventure. So I'm going to give you the credit for that.
I think it's a big adventure. It's a wild one.
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, I've got an old camper van and oh my goodness. The biggest adventures we've had is when we've got 15 minutes down the road and it's broken and we're trying to fix the tire on the side of the M4 and stuff like that. So yeah, major, hats off to you. But I think it's something around that mindset and that the willingness to embrace that uncertainty and give it a go, even though, like you said, it might go wrong. You might break down, things could happen, but that actually the excitement, the adventure, the exploration and the growth are so much are worth that risk.
Well, it's a ride, isn't it? It's a ride, life. And are we going to live it? Are we going to pootle along? And that's okay. Too, if people want to pootle, whatever that means, it's great. And it has the potential to be a vibrant time. And so even though, I had teens with me on the Scottish island, I had, the triplets, my triplets, 2 boys and a girl. They were like, well, where's our Kindle? Mummy, when can we watch a movie? I was like, well, no, we can't here. That's it. We're not. Get a bucket and go and crab. And we were out. It was full of ticks as well. So that was interesting. We learned about taking ticks off one another. And, the things that we learned, we had to take all of our food over. That was before I gave alcohol up. It would have been so much better to be sober on the island, because I wouldn't have had to think, well, is that my last bottle of Prosecco? Now I wouldn't give a damn. But it was such an experience. It's memory making. And was it all great? No. Did I think, whatever have I done? Absolutely. I thought I was mad. And, I have disabled children too that I take. And so the transition that I took on that journey, the transitions are phenomenal in doing a trip like that. The considerations of how my son would cope with that was such a big deal to me, because I was the only adult. And there's something about like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to sit at home and say, no, my teens don't like it? Or, oh, well, what happens if? No, of course I wasn't. I was going to give it a go. That's it. That's why I love your show. It's about this, isn't it? It's that have it a go mindset, cracking things open, because we can get ever so fixed.
I love that idea of cracking things open. Actually, that's that really resonates, because it's about, like you said, one, what's the alternative? That we stay what we believe to be safe, which is maybe safe psychologically in some ways, but also actually I think has such an impact on our mental well-being, on our sense of ourself, and actually is probably the less safe option at the end of the day. Or like you said, taking that risk, and a calculated risk,
very very
but at the same time, and I think it comes down to partly that belief of I can do this and it'll be okay. At some level it'll be okay. And the more that you do those things, the more that you believe that you've got the resources, the internal resources to find a way through, I think.
Well, isn't adventure a muscle? It's a bit like a muscle. We can leave it dormant or get it flabby, but actually we have to exercise it. We have to find where our limits are. Where are they? And I don't know where mine are yet. I haven't, because of course, as a mother, your children are always growing. So what's possible will change. And I have big ambitions we have big ambitions for our family of travel. Once things open up, we will be adventuring again. And sometimes we adventure in very tiny ways. We just went on a big walk this morning to a completely different local area that was thrilling, absolutely thrilling. We'd never found it before. And it's been sitting right in front of us, and that was an adventure. So it's kind of those micro adventures as well as the big ones that is definitely an intentional muscle to exercise, though, for us.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting. We can sometimes find it easier to think about the bigger adventures, but like you said, that
Yes.
actually there's something that we can practice every day, just getting out, like you said, taking a different route, exploring. And in a way, those can be the really exciting, even more exciting, because you just don't even realize they exist and there, and capturing that spirit. And I think children are such a wonderful way to experience that, because actually they get that excitement from such, what we might consider to be small events, but actually it's noticing those small differences that I think has such an impact. So just for those people who might be listening and thinking, actually, I really want to get started on my own adventure, or maybe I'm wrestling with that guilt or the needs and demands of others in terms of getting started. This all resonates with me. This is where I am. And I want to try and maybe reclaim that bit of me back. What's one piece of advice you'd give them?
Oh, listen to your soul's desire. What do you have appetite for? Where is it? Is it, if an adventure to you means playing board games, then play board games. If it's like, it's that not worrying about what adventure means to others. And I love the word that you're using here, Nicki, which, that reclaim. Look back to when you were, when you felt that life had a blank canvas. It was a blank canvas for you. If you ever did, that hopeful, those magical eyes that you're looking out on the future, what were you hoping to have done? Roller skating? Maybe it was that. Throwing yourself into the sea? What was it? And I would start there, because that inner child, place of inner child, really has the clues. And I see a lot of men doing this. I see a lot of men who don't necessarily, and some do lose what they really loved doing, but some manage to retain it. They keep doing enough of the elements of what brings them alive that they don't quite lose that. And I really want that the kind of day-to-day pieces of being a mother can really erode this playfulness. And I think I have to look at playfulness and the inner child.
I love the use of the word erode there, actually, because I was just thinking partly what happens as well is that sometimes we don't even realize it's happening. And these are the conversations I have with people often who, had wonderful adventures and did incredible things and still do, but somehow within them, maybe it's an erosion of confidence, or just an erosion of, I guess, doing things for themselves over a period of time, or like you said, that light them up, and often leaves them in a place of going 10 years on, or whenever it is, just turning around and going, where did that bit of me go?
Fun. Do you know, the fun, light. It's hard, isn't it, for so many of us when we've got such responsibilities, such very serious responsibilities on our shoulders, the people we love, maybe employees, big responsibilities that actually, in our jobs that mean that we lose that sense of wonder and lightness. And that's something to really reclaim and recover. But it doesn't happen magically. It doesn't happen just because you wake up. You have to actually intentionally focus on it, make it happen. That person is still in you somewhere. Of course he is and she is. Of course. They're not gone.
Absolutely. That's been so amazing, Danusia. Thank you so much. If people want to find out more about you, about the book, about your podcast, where can they go?
Well, the podcast School for Mothers and School for Fathers, they're everywhere that you listen to podcasts. My DanusiaMalinaDerben.com, you'll probably find everything there, or LinkedIn. We're on Insta, School for Mothers Podcast. I mean, it's an unusual name. You'll probably find me if you put me in.
Awesome.
You know?
I'm sure we'll have plenty of people Googling you after this, so I don't need to worry. And when's the publication date for the book as well?
It's 30th of March. I think it's, oh my goodness.
So it's,
yes.
It will be published as we go to press with this, if that's the term. Yes. So
yes.
you can order the book now or pre-order it if you happen to listen to it before.
Pre-order. But... yeah, I think it's a number one in something. So it's great. I mean, I'm not watching it avidly, but it's doing okay.
Fantastic.
So, well, it's been lovely, Nicki.
It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. Obviously, I'll pop all of those links in the show notes so everyone can go and find you and find the book and read it. And yes, thank you so much. That was just amazing. I could have chatted for hours. So I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today.
Oh, thanks, Nicki.
Take care.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
So I hope you were as inspired by that conversation with Danusia as I was having it. One of the key challenges, not just for parents, for everyone in modern life, is finding the time for you, finding the time to do the things that fill you up, that make you feel present and whole and engaged and alive. And if you can find a way to do that, I think that goes such a long way to trying to tackle some of the challenges I think we experience, that sense of overwhelm and bombardment with demands on our time, with demands on our energy, and coming at us from all angles all of the time. It was interesting. I was having a conversation with my children in the car this morning, and my daughter was saying, so what was it like in the 90s? Thinking that was a really long time ago, which I guess it sort of is. That makes me feel old. But yeah, she was sort of saying, so what did you have? What didn't you have? And I was talking about what we used to do. And I said, well, I showed you photos of when I was working winter seasons and out with friends and, out in the mountains. And she was like, yeah, but what was different? I said, well, we didn't have mobile phones. So I guess we didn't have constant access or people constantly accessing us. I guess the internet was there, but I mainly use it for an email maybe once a week. And that was late 90s, I guess. So what am I witching on about? Anyway, I guess my point being that it made me reflect on how, without in a way realizing it, our lives have become so crowded, even when we're not actually doing anything. So there's demands on our energy, on our time, on our sense of ourselves, really, and trying to squeeze in those moments has become so much more challenging. And a lot of this podcast really is about, speaking to people who have, not all the time, but sometimes managed to find ways to fit that thing that sort of feeds them and brings them to life into their sort of the everyday normality of their lives. And so in a way, I think my conversation with Danusia is the perfect way to end this season, because absolutely that's what her book is about. Actually, how do we find our own way through the noise that's around us too? And that's it. That brings me to the end of season 2. Gosh, I didn't think, it was a couple of months ago. I was like beginning of January, and here we are almost into spring. I'm going to say we are in spring. It's been really sunny the last few days, which has been wonderful. And I think there's something about spring that just brings that real sense of energy and potential and growth and excitement. And so I'm going to pause here for a few weeks. We're going to be back again towards the end of April, beginning of May. I've got so many amazing guests lined up for you. I am so excited. I'm in the midst of recording them as we speak. So I can't wait to bring you those conversations. So please do stick with me, stick with the podcast. If you've enjoyed this season or my previous seasons, if you've listened to any of the episodes and enjoyed them, please do go in and leave me a review on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the podcast on your favorite channel, drop me a message, drop me a line. I've had so many lovely messages over the last few weeks from people telling me that they've enjoyed it, telling me that it's resonated with them. And I can't tell you how wonderful that is to hear as a podcaster, because often you feel like you're sending it out into the deep blue yonder and you don't know people's reactions. So thank you for your engagement. Thank you for allowing me to do something that gives me so much energy and joy. And thank you to all my incredible guests that I've spoken to, never fail to inspire me with their stories, with their energy, with the ways in which they bring their worlds to life. So thank you. I hope you stick with me in the meantime. So if you want to get in touch, please do reach out. You can follow me on Instagram, Resilience at Work. You can contact me via my website, resiliencework.co.uk. You can also join us on Facebook in the Everyday Adventure Club. And otherwise, I look forward to speaking to you again very soon. Take care. Bye.